Hey, welcome back to episode number 61 of Escape the J Curve, and I am your host, Rohan Nag. How are you guys all doing? I'm back after, I think my last episode was published on the 21st of September. I'm back after a couple of weeks. I was busy, and now I'm going to publish on a regular basis again. And today I'm going to be talking about the global pandemic. And, these are very, very tough times due to the coronavirus. There's fear about the future. There's uncertainty about when it's going to end. The economy is in jeopardy. Some industries like travel, tourism, airlines, hospitality, those industries are dead, and probably they'll never be the same after the pandemic. They're never going to see the highs they saw before the pandemic hit. So I know this is pretty tough for a lot of people out there, and I wanted to publish this episode to talk to people who are suffering from, a lack of direction, a lack of meaning and purpose due to the COVID-19 pandemic, or just otherwise, because, I have seen it in a lot of people. Even before the COVID-19, people are living meaningless and reckless and purposeless lives. I've seen it in my relatives, a lot of really close people in my life. They have completely destroyed their lives, their potential, because they did not have some higher purpose that was pulling them to do better in their lives. I've seen it in my friends. I've seen it in myself when I was lost in a nihilistic hellhole in my mid to late 20s, and I've managed to crawl my way out of that situation. And I'm going to talk about it, and it might help people who are lacking motivation, direction, purpose in these very scary times. I'm going to make a bold claim. I'm going to talk about the purpose of life in this episode. It's huge, and purpose of life. Who is this guy who is talking about the purpose of life? That's a deep question, and scientists and religious people have been trying to figure this answer out for centuries. But I have thought this through and arrived at an answer, and it's pretty logical if you go through the steps one by one. And if you follow the train of logic, it's pretty easy to figure out the meaning and purpose of life in less than 5 minutes. Let's give it a shot. Let's look at nature. Okay, let's start off there. That is our first step. If you look closely at nature, every organism in nature has a purpose, or maybe we can say it has two purposes. One important one, and then there is a higher purpose to every organism in nature. What is the basic purpose of life, of every organism, of every creature, of every living being in nature? And that is, the first one is survival and replication. So basically, every organism wants to survive and thrive, and they want to pass on their genetic information into the next generation. That is basically replication or reproduction. But if you look a bit closer, you would find that there is a higher purpose to every organism in nature, and it's not just survival and replication. Let's take an example. Let's look at the food chain. Okay, so the source of energy in the world is sun, right? So the the power or the energy of sun is captured by plants, and they use a process called photosynthesis, and they use they use carbon dioxide, sunlight to produce oxygen and glucose, and that's the first step. Now these plants are consumed by herbivores, animals that only consume plants, and they get the energy of the sun through the process of photosynthesis and what is captured by the plants, and then that energy is then passed on to carnivores, animals who eat other animals, and they get their proteins, they get their energy, they get their nutrition from herbivores, from animals that consume plants. And next up, when these animals, the carnivores, die, their bodies decay, and there are various microorganisms which help the bodies to decay, and the decaying carcass is converted into nutrients which are captured in the soil, and then plants uses nutrients to grow. So it's a never-ending cycle, the food chain, and every organism plays a part in that cycle. And this is only a small spectrum of nature. There are other cycles going on in nature. So it's easy to figure out from this that every animal, every organism in nature has two dual purposes. Obviously, the first one is survive and replicate and reproduce, which every animal is doing. Also, they're playing a higher purpose. They're a piece in the puzzle of the cycle of nature. So let's consider human beings now. Human beings are gifted with a higher intelligence, consciousness, emotional intelligence, curiosity, ability to work in groups, ability to build certain things, huge structures, the ability for engineering and mathematics and science and music. And we have done so many wonderful things throughout history, from being hunters and gatherers to have built modern societies which are technology and engineering based. We have seen an amazing transformation. So every human being is gifted with these abilities such as intelligence, music, consciousness, ability to work in teams, ability to communicate in certain way. So it seems illogical to think that one single human being, the most gifted species on earth, are here to just survive and reproduce. That cannot be the essence of human life. We must have a higher purpose. Now, if we want to find out what that higher purpose is, we need to look at people who are celebrated as heroes in our society. There are people we admire, there are people who inspire us to be better, and there are examples in every field possible. For example, if you think about supreme athletes, greatest athletes of all time, like Kobe Bryant in basketball, for example, or entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, or musicians like the Beatles, or authors like Stephen King, or revolutionaries like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi, or people with the message of peace and love like Mother Teresa. The question is, why do we admire them? What is the common thread that binds them all together? Now, if we can figure it out, we must, if we can figure out why we admire these people, we understand what are desirable traits in human beings that are admired, that inspire other people. And those must be the traits, or those must be the higher purpose that we should look for in our lives. So if we follow the chain of logic, it becomes pretty simple, right? So far, we have been able to figure out that every organism in nature, be it a cow or a goat or a human being, they all have a role to play in nature. And if we look at the best in humanity, and if we can figure out what we admire about them, we can figure out what is that higher purpose that we should all aim for in our lives, right? Okay, let's try to look at the things that are common between all these people. Kobe Bryant, Elon Musk, the Beatles, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., whoever it is that you admire. Why do you admire them? For me, I have found 3 things that cause this phenomenon. Number 1, personal stories of change and triumph. They overcame huge obstacles. So if you look at the life of Nelson Mandela, he was in prison for 30 years. And in that time, he spent the time productively. He learned to read. He read a lot of books. He created a lot of good material on politics and how people should treat each other and things like that. So he changed an obstacle into a story of personal triumph. Second, built elite level skills through years of perseverance and discipline. So if you look at Kobe Bryant, an elite athlete, and some call him probably the greatest basketball player to have ever lived. And when he was 13, he was dropped from his school basketball team. But he made a promise to himself that the next year he is going to be so good that he is never going to be dropped from a basketball team. And he has spoken about this in a lot of interviews. You can look it up on YouTube. And that's what he did. For the next year and a half, he just practiced. So when he came back the year after, his skills were so superior to all the players that were in the team. He was just crushing them. And then, of course, he kept up that work ethic through his entire career, and he became the greatest basketball player of all time. What is the next common trait between these people who we look up to? They shared their message and skill with the world, and they provided immense joy to the people around them. They were not selfish. They did not create that skill just to, make personal gains, but they shared their message, they shared their skills, they shared their magic, their talent with the world. And a lot of people over the world found joy in what they had to offer to the world. So, for example, if you look at, say, Michael Jackson, he is probably the most recognized musical person in the last 2 to 3 decades. And he spent a lot of joy, a message of love through his music to the entire world. And that's why when he passed away, there was a huge sadness engulfing the world. People really missed him. People thought he was valuable. People found joy in what he did. And that's why when he was no longer there, people felt a huge void in their lives. Okay, now that we know what separates these people from ordinary people, people we admire, people we look up to, people we find inspiration in, we kind of can summarize what is the purpose of life and what we should be looking to do. Okay, so the first thing is to find an area we want to be known for. It could be entrepreneurship, it could be music, it could be YouTube, it could be product development, it could be marketing, it could be politics, it could be journalism, it could be any sort of sports. But we have to pick an area we want to be known for. Second, we need to build elite level skills in that area. And thirdly, when we have mastered the craft, we need to share our message. We need to share our talent. We need to share our skill with the world in a way that brings joy to people. And when we do that, fame, power, money, influence, inner joy, peace, love, we can have it all because we are living a life of higher purpose. So that's my antidote to chaos and meaninglessness and lack of fulfillment or loneliness or whatever we are feeling right now during the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 is bad. A lot of people have lost their lives. A lot of families are impacted. But if we can find our true calling and use the COVID-19 to build on that skill, we could come out the other side better people who are able to serve more people. We are able to bring joy to the world. We are able to bring something that changes people's lives in magnificent ways. So there is a silver lining there. So there you go. It might seem a little arrogant for me to be talking about the purpose of life, but I have thought about this and I tried to simplify it for me. And I thought this message would be very helpful for people who are struggling with the lack of direction and purpose in COVID-19 or otherwise. And that's the way I think about it. That's the way I look at it. And if you follow these simple steps and the train of logic, you can arrive at your own conclusions. And maybe you would have an answer about what you should be doing with your life, and that could be valuable because I've seen a lot of people struggle with a sense of anxiety over not having lived their best life, or not working towards big goals, or not having a direction or meaning or purpose to what they're doing. So thank you so much for listening in. I would be publishing on a regular basis from now on. I'll be back to you tomorrow with the follow-up to this episode, where once you have figured out what to do, I would tell you how to get this message across and why you should be getting your message across and talking to people and sharing your love, sharing your gift, sharing your talent, sharing your skills with other people, and what's the best way to do it. Thank you so much for listening in. I will catch you tomorrow.